company had done was illegal. It violated their privacy laws. And they said, you can't do business in our countries. And Clearview had been offering trials to police departments and officers around the world, but it pulled back. And yeah, it got kicked out of Europe and Canada and Australia. It was effective. It wasn't effective in that the regulator said, delete our citizens from your database. And Clearview has kind of shrugged their shoulders about that.
Right.
But if you live in those places, you can contact Clearview and say, I want you to delete all my photos. Right now, it's kind of the onus is on individuals. But yeah, I mean, regulation can hold back technology. We can choose the future we want to live in. We don't have to just accept that, this is the world because it's possible to do these things technically.
Are there ways that individuals and organizations can push for privacy rights in the face of this advancing, surveillance technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it's a systemic problem. To making laws, creating new regulations is on the people we elect, the people in power. So as individuals, that's challenging. But I think as individuals, what we can do is, one, as always, just thinking about what you put publicly on the internet, what other people put up of you. And then if you live there's a few states already here in the US that have relevant laws. And so if you live in a place with a state law that gives you the right to access information a company holds on you and delete it, like California, Colorado, Connecticut, Virginia, you can go to Clearview and get yourself removed from the database. And we do actually have one state with a really strong law, Illinois, that says if a company wants to use your biometrics, like your face print or your voice print or your fingerprints, they need to get your permission or pay a fine of up to $5,000. And so people in Illinois are protected against this. I mentioned Madison Square Garden. They have a theater in Chicago, but they can't ban lawyers there with facial recognition technology because they're not allowed to under this law. So one takeaway from the book is that laws do work. They can work.
It sounds like what we need is a federal law, because if it's state by state, that would take a long time.
But privacy is a bipartisan issue. Like, we care about this. We need to protect people against this. We just haven't gotten a really relevant law at the national level yet.
You mentioned that it's bipartisan, and I think that's interesting because it would seem like everybody wants a certain degree of privacy, right? Nobody wants to just walk around totally exposed with a personal life. But with that in mind, people really also want convenience, right? They want to be able to, people will give away their information to a surprising degree. I think a lot of us were surprised by what everyone would just kind of throw online, not even worth them. Phone number, address, email. Our face, though, what's different about our face?
I mean, the face, one thing, it's hard to hide it. Basically, you need a ski mask if you want to avoid being identified this way, because the facial recognition companies like Clearview AI and others have even made this work around COVID masks. But I mean, I just think I think there's many convenient ways to use facial recognition. I open my phone with my face. I want the benefit. I do think using facial recognition technology to solve crimes is a benefit, as long as you do it right and you do all the investigating you need to. There have been a handful of mistaken arrests, people arrested for the crime of looking like someone else. I don't think that's a benefit, but yeah, I mean, there's benefits to this, and my hope would be that we can get those conveniences, like we can get the good parts of the technology, but not have to submit to it just being ubiquitous and just everywhere, and that you can no longer have a private conversation over dinner because you fear that somebody next to you could take your photo and then all of a sudden understand everyone you're gossiping about. So my hope is that we can harness the good, the conveniences. One thing I've been thinking a lot about is Meta has talked about how the chief technology officer a few years ago said, I'd love to put facial recognition capabilities in these augmented reality classes that we're trying to develop. I think there's so much good that could come of it for those of us who can't remember somebody's name at a cocktail party, or people who are blind or have kind of face blindness. But he said, they're worried about how society would react, whether it would be legal. But I kind of could imagine this future in which maybe Facebook develops augmented reality glasses and they create an opt-in model for facial recognition, where you could say, Yeah, I want everyone to recognize my face, or I want my friends to recognize my face, or my friends of friends, that we'd have like privacy settings for our face in the
Right.
same way that we have them for our social media profiles. And I've been on book tour, and so at an event in San Francisco, I said, if these glasses existed, how many of you would opt into your face being recognized? And a third of the crowd actually raised their hands. And
Really?
I was surprised. I asked the same question in New York, same size crowd, like 200 people, and only one person raised their hand. So, yeah, it's such a spectrum of what people are
Right.
comfortable with.
Yeah, I know that I personally am terrible at remembering names and faces, and very often I'll see someone in the supermarket, and it'll be the parent of a friend of one of my kids, and I'll think, I know this guy, I don't know his name, I don't know what he does, this is really embarrassing, let's just buy my lemons and get out of here before I say something embarrassing, and he realizes I have no idea who I'm talking to. But then again, we can't have everything. I mean, maybe that's just the cost of privacy.
Right, and then some people, like, I make that point. I said, wouldn't it be nice? I've had this problem where people come up to me to sign the book, and I'm supposed to know their name, and I'm just blanking on it. I'm like, oh my god, I wish I had Clearview on my phone right now. But then I think critics who are really worried about all the chilling effects of this technology say, really? It's worth our loss of anonymity to avoid that little bit of social awkwardness, and I understand that resonates with me.
I mean, because everything's an exchange. I feel like a lot of times that gets lost in the conversation about technological advancements. It's sort of like a new medicine, right? There's always some side effect, but is it worth the side effect?
Right. Like, I love my phone. I love that I can easily connect with people. I can drop into any city in the world and immediately, call an Uber, know where to go, know the best restaurants. But also, I hate how much I stare at my phone
Right,
and how
right.
addicted to it I am.
So is Clearview still in business? I mean, are they a viable company? What's going on with them?
Yeah, so Clearview AI is still in business, still have lots of contracts with law enforcement here in the U.S. They have a sizable contract with the Department of Homeland Security, with ICE. The FBI has a contract with them. The Army funded their research into an app for augmented reality glasses that soldiers could wear on bases so that they could get information about people in real time around them. They are facing lawsuits in a few different states here. They have been issued sizable fines by regulators outside of the U.S., but so far they haven't paid them, and they're, appealing them kind of forever. And I think it's hard for regulators to force a company that's based in the U.S. to pay the fine. So, yeah, I'm
Right.
watching. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But yeah, they're still in business. They're still selling facial recognition technology, and they're still growing their database of faces.
And is that an issue as far as they're scraping? I assume Instagram, which is owned by Meta, and Facebook are two of the biggest places to scrape from. Are they allowed to do that?
Well, so when these companies, Google, LinkedIn, Venmo, Facebook, found out that Clearview AI had created this database with their images, they all sent the company cease and desist letters.
Right.
And said, stop doing this, delete the information that you scraped, it violates our terms of service. But then they didn't do anything else. I mean, they didn't sue. They haven't forced the issue. So as far as I know, Clearview AI is still doing what it's doing, has kept all that information in our database, and I can only assume is gathering more.
So was that just sort of a performance on the behalf of the tech giants?
It's kind of a gray legal issue. It's unclear if this violates the law to kind of scrape information that's on the public internet. There's one case where LinkedIn sued a company that was scraping information from their site, and basically a federal judge said that it wasn't illegal. And so I don't know if that's why the companies didn't pursue it more, that they just thought they wouldn't win in court, and they didn't necessarily want to bring more attention to the fact that all their
Right.
users' photos have been taken.
Right, so they're just kind of put their head down, hope people don't pay attention. In
Yeah.
the wake of your book coming out, you're doing really well. People are loving it. Has there been any reaction on Clearview's behalf, or on any of the people at Clearview, or any of the people mentioned in the book?
I haven't heard anything from Clearview so far. I'm not sure how I feel about the book, but I have been hearing from a lot of individuals and policymakers asking, so what are these laws? For the people, basically your face is, how well your face is protected depends on where you live. And so people that live in places where their face is not very well protected have been asking me, well, what are these effective laws? You know, what do they look like? How could we do that elsewhere in the state at the local level? And so I do think there's been a lot of thought to that, and that I think that's where, I mean, when I look at the last decade in the United States, decade or more, in terms of privacy laws, it's all happened at the local and state level. So I assume that's how it'll continue to go. So I don't know, maybe we'll see more states pass privacy laws that kind of protect you against something like this, allow you to get out of Clearview's database if you don't want to be in it.
Right. Well, it's funny because I imagine you wrote the book because I mean, you're an investigative journalist and you write about tech, it makes sense, you're pursuing it. But it is a bit of, it's also a wake-up call.
Yeah, I just really think we could lose that ability to just assume that when you're going about your life and you're just walking around, you can assume you're anonymous to anyone that you don't actually know.
I know that feeling, and I'm sure most people do, when you're hanging out with your friends and the conversation gets a little sort of sideways, and then you say things you think, oh, thank God no one's around because I don't want to stand by that comment in public. You know, that was a very bad joke. So yeah, it is terrifying to think everything is just, it could be out in the air. I wish I could sort of go back in time and give Thomas Jefferson a nudge and add privacy to life, liberty, privacy in the pursuit of happiness. I feel like that would have saved us a lot of trouble hundreds of years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely this tension here in the U.S. is between privacy and kind of right to information, freedom of speech, and then also privacy versus safety and security.
Right.
And, you know, this is a useful tool for law enforcement, as long as they don't get it wrong. I mean,
Sure.
I think it's pretty uncomfortable to think that every time police are trying to solve a shoplifting crime and they use Clearview AI, they're searching through all of our photos to try to make a match. And sometimes that does go wrong because we're not all unique snowflakes, as one professor put it to me. We have doppelgangers in the world, and yeah, so that's a downside.
Yeah, one thing you make clear in the book, and I didn't know this before, is when people do facial recognition searches, it doesn't just do one hit, like the way you see it in the movie or TV. It's like scan, right? Bang, like there's your terrorist, he's in Bulgaria. It's just a list of 20, 30, 40 potential people, and then it's up to the officer or whatever to figure it out. So that is scary because there could be all these false flags, right? You could be in a list because you look, I don't know, 80% like somebody.
Yeah, you get this long list with kind of confidence scores about how sure the computer is, and ultimately it's this human person picking it out.
Yeah.
And so there's one guy, Randall Karan Reed, lives in Atlanta, Georgia, gets pulled over and arrested for basically stealing purses in Louisiana, and he'd never even been to the state before.
Wow.
He ended up getting held in jail for a week while waiting extradition to Louisiana before people realized actually it wasn't him, and he had been identified with Clearview AI, and he just looked a lot like this other guy. And so one thing, if we do accept, we're saying yes, facial recognition technology is a tool that law enforcement should have, we need better rules about how they use it and the amount of investigating you need to do before you arrest somebody.
Reading is a form of meditation that makes you smarter. It's a radical act of patience in this frenetic, tech-addicted world we all live in. And the data shows reading is a kind of miracle drug. It reduces stress, increases motivation, improves sleep. It's correlated with more success, higher income. And books don't run out of batteries. But what to read? We at the Next Big Idea Club can help you with that. You've heard about our app, which provides daily book summaries from the authors themselves, but have you heard about our box subscription? Go to nextbigideaclub.com to learn all about it. Here's the short version. Sign up for a Next Big Idea Club hardcover box subscription, and you will get 4 boxes per year, each containing 2 books. That's 8 books per year, and not just any books, the best books of the season, according to our 4 legendary curators, Malcolm Gladwell, Susan Cain, Daniel Pink, and Adam Grant. Plus, we discuss the books with the authors and distill them into exclusive audio e-courses. Go to nextbigideaclub.com and become a member of our growing community.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with New York Times reporter Kashmir Hill about her new book, Face Belongs to Us. I asked her, what's the relationship between facial recognition and generative AI?
So many of the questions are the same about Clearview AI, facial recognition technology, and generative AI, just in terms of the scraping all this information from the internet and whether companies should have the right to do that, our ability to kind of get out of the databases. But in terms of preventing it, so one thing that a technologist who's kind of dedicated to privacy told me about was an idea where we essentially disguise photos that we put online, change them at the pixel level so that it's not possible to derive this biometric face print that would match to us in the real world. But it would require kind of like a large scale implementation. A company like Meta would have to just roll this out on all of their photos, and it would only work moving forward. For the photos that Clearview already has in its database, not really possible to do that. But yeah, I worry about facial recognition technology combined with generative AI.
Sure.
I'm thinking, you see a dad and his son playing on the playground. You take a photo of the kid, you search them with a tool like this, find images of them, figure out who they are, who the parents are, find a video of them, get their voice print, do a generative AI thing of them pretending that they're kidnapped, call the mother, say, give me $10,000 right now, I have your child. Everything. Unfortunately, I would say everything.
Michal Geva runs a venture fund when she's not helping with the war effort. Now she's part of a volunteer corps of thousands of people at Expo Tel Aviv. Parents flit around the landscaping in this sort of convention center that's become a hub for a huge range of volunteer projects. This is about much more than supplying the soldiers. It's everything from mental health counseling to missing persons investigations.
We have 20 different operations. My specific operation started with rescuing people.
Members of her team drove to towns in southern Israel and got people who'd been hiding in safe rooms, some of them for nearly 24 hours. This volunteer organization grew out of a mass protest movement that had been demonstrating every week for 10 months against Israel's far-right religious government and its weakening of the judiciary. But now it includes people of every political leaning. In the Expo's cavernous basement parking garage, all the donations get sorted into boxes. A press liaison named Terry Newman shows us around.
Right, so here you can see mattresses, baby chairs, cots. We've had hundreds of tons of material coming through here.
Where do these come from and where are they going?
So people are donating them, and you should also know people are donating cars. We've got families who have come from the destroyed villages who've got kids and they need to get around. People who've got spare cars are donating cars.
For him, this organization is a source of great pride, a sign that the country is coming together in a crisis and channeling its trauma into something useful. But many of the people here are frustrated that the people had to make this happen themselves. Like Maya Armon, a filmmaker and MBA student who created a donation hub at the Expo called Maya's Storage.
I come here at 9 and I leave at at midnight or 1 a.m.
Could I take a step back for a minute and just ask you a big picture question?
Yeah.
Right now, thousands of volunteers are doing a wide range of things. Should this be the responsibility of volunteers organizing themselves?
Definitely not. Sorry for cutting you.
Please.
No, definitely not. It should be the responsibility of the government.
She has friends in the Army and has heard the requests of soldiers who lack everything from underwear to tactical gear. Is that embarrassing?
Is that a question even? Of course it is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed by the entire situation. I'm embarrassed by the situation that happened in first place.
Many Israelis will tell you that criticizing the government is a favorite national pastime. But like so much that's happened since the October 7th massacre, the scale of this frustration seems different. We got one more answer to the question of how to think about this huge civilian operation as we left the expo. We ran into a couple leaving a volunteer shift with their son. Shir Shalom said this scene, this mobilization, is an essential part of our country's identity.
I think that as a nation, also Israeli, also Jewish, because we are so used to terror attacks and we are so used to recovery. So I think that regardless if the government should do it or not, this is really the nature of this country. This is us.
Of course, inside the Gaza Strip, civilians are also anticipating a possible ground invasion, and they are running out of basics like food, water, and medicine, let alone protective gear.
That was our co-host Ari Shapiro reporting from Tel Aviv, Israel. There's been yet another delay in the murder case of rapper Tupac Shakur. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the suspect charged with the murder, did not enter a plea in a Las Vegas court this morning because his legal representation is still being sorted out. This is the second time now that Davis's arraignment has been delayed. Joining me to discuss this 27-year-old case is NPR music editor Sheldon Pierce. Hey, Sheldon.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. Remind us who Dwayne Davis is.
Davis is a Compton gang leader and a self-described five-star general from a group of Crips known to police as the Burris Street Crew. He's been a person of interest in the Tupac case since the beginning, and informants were telling police he was one of the four men in the Cadillac from which the bullets were fired. He's since corroborated that story in interviews and in his own 2019 memoir. Just as a refresher, the murder happened in September 1996. The Death Row label boss, Marion Suge Knight, was at the wheel, Tupac was in the passenger seat, and both of them were shot at a red light by passengers in that Cadillac. Nobody thinks that the shooter was Davis, but Davis is now being considered the ringleader who ordered the death that night.
The question that I have had since this development first came out was that if Davis had been so public for so long about being in the shooter's car that night, why did it take so long to charge him with murder?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Outsiders have suggested that the cops haven't really been working as hard as they needed to solve this case. And the cops themselves have pointed to the fact that eyewitnesses weren't willing to come forward at the time. Both were probably factors. A potential witness was killed in an unrelated shooting a few months after Tupac was killed. But Davis, who first acknowledged his involvement publicly in an LAPD investigation that happened a few years later, entered into what was called a proffer agreement that they said those conversations couldn't be used against him in further cases.
So what changed then? Why is this in court?
Well, this case has sort of been brewing for the past few years, in part because Davis himself started admitting it openly in the public, in TV interviews and in interviews online. For a long time, the district attorney said they simply didn't have enough evidence to establish a chain of events, but now they believe that they have enough to prove Davis acquired a gun to get back at Tupac and Suge. And the police are seeing this as sort of their final attempt to make a case, and it really feels like it is their last shot. I mean, if they can't make this case at this point, I don't see another scenario in which it happens.
So after this delay, what happens next?
Well, the delayed arraignment is now scheduled to happen in 2 weeks. A well-known Las Vegas criminal lawyer, Ross Goodman, says he's going to take Davis on as a client. Whether Davis hires him or not, the judge has said that it's clear that this case is going forward on November 2nd. And so we should know then how Davis makes his plea. But, you know, for a long time, this case has been painted as a puzzle to be solved. It seems now that it was more an issue of substantiation, and perhaps, I mean, this time maybe we'll get an opportunity to provide some closure to this case.
And we will see. That's NPR's Sheldon Pierce. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thanks so much, Scott.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Good evening, this is 91.7 WVXU. Support comes from the Joseph Clark Gallery, Arts of Africa in Northside, featuring traditional tribal arts and artifacts from sub-Saharan West Africa. Authentic pieces for purchase include masks, figures, textiles, jewelry, ritual objects, and more. The gallery also features original works by local artists and artisans. More at josephclarkgallery.com.
Support comes from Ohio University, welcoming its largest freshman class in its 219-year history with 87% in-state students. Ohio University is helping train the next generation of leaders. Learn more at ohio.edu. That's ohio.edu.
Support comes from Co-op Cincy's Cheers to Cooperative celebration. Your chance to experience a night of good company, drinks, and tapas while connecting with people interested in building a more equitable economy. October 20th, 7 till 9 at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. Registration online at coopcincy.org/events. That's coopcincy.org/events.
Support comes from Roads, Rivers, and Trails in partnership with NRS Loveland Paddle Sports and 50 West. RRT is hosting a Tire King Challenge, a fundraiser to help increase support of Adventure Crew and Little Miami Conservancy in river cleanup and awareness for our region's beautiful waterways. Friday, October 27th, tickets at roadsriversandtrails.com.
Support comes from Harmon Facial Plastic Surgery in Hyde Park Square. With the mission to help people in their journey toward feeling confident, fellowship-trained Dr. Jeffrey Harmon specializes in the extended deep plane facelift, a procedure that lifts the cheeks, jawline, and neck in a natural direction to address the signs of facial aging. Request a consultation at harmonface.com.
The latest on the racial wealth gap on Marketplace coming up in about 10 minutes at 6:30 here on 91.7 WVXU.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from National Pork Board, representing America's pig farmers. Information about the pork industry's commitments to bring sustainable pork products to family tables nationwide is at porkcares.org. And from the Lodestar Foundation, inspired by the principle that helping someone else less fortunate is a path to a happier, healthier, and more meaningful life. Learn more at lodestarfoundation.org.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Scott Detrow.
And I'm Elsa Chang. Time now for our Science News Roundup from our friends at NPR's Shortwave Podcast. Aaron Scott and Regina Barber. Hello to both of you.
Hey, Elsa. Elsa.
So you have brought us 3 science stories that grabbed you this week. What have you got?
We've got peak viewing of a meteor shower.
Plus a rare glimpse of what the ocean floor looked like 480 million years ago.
Whoa.
And how albatross use sound to help navigate the open ocean.
Ooh, let's start with that one, Aaron. Let's talk about the albatrosses.
Yes, albatross are amazing. They're enormous. They have the largest wingspan of any bird on Earth, up to 11 feet. They can weigh as much as a toddler. And they're amazing long-distance flyers. They can cover thousands of miles in a single trip. According to one calculation, over the course of their lifetime, they actually fly the equivalent of going to the moon and back 10 times.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, but like with all seabirds, all this travel raises a huge question. How do they navigate over the open ocean? There's no visible landmarks, so researchers think they must be using other cues. There's some evidence that they use smell and the Earth's magnetic field.
And now researchers have evidence for a new cue. In a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, they found that wandering albatrosses tend to fly towards infrasound.
Infrasound? Is that like infrared light, but for sound? What is that?
Yes, exactly. It's just like infrared light is low-frequency light, infrasound is low-frequency sound. We humans can't hear it, but it's everywhere out there on the ocean because it's created whenever waves are colliding with each other. This is one of the paper's lead authors, Natasha Gillies. She's a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Liverpool.
So the idea that other animals can perceive infrasound isn't totally novel. So elephants, some large cetaceans like whales are known to use it for communication. But the idea that it might be a cue for movement has been much less well explored, and certainly not at all in seabirds.
Wow, I had no idea about elephants. Okay, so how did the researchers explore this with albatrosses? Albatrossi?
Albatrosses. They created acoustic maps of the ocean using data from a network of microphones that are set up to actually detect nuclear explosions. And then they attached GPS trackers to nearly 90 birds and compared where they flew to these acoustic maps.
And they found that the birds were more likely to fly towards areas with louder infrasound created from strong colliding waves.
Okay, so it seems like the birds were actually trying to fly into areas with strong waves. Why would they do that instinctually?
Well, they rely on wind to soar, and choppy, wavy areas generally mean a lot of wind and updrafts to give them a boost. Waves crashing against a shoreline also create infrasound, so they thought it also could have to do with them finding their way home.
Natasha says, to her knowledge, this is the first study to show that any animal is using infrasound to navigate, but she thinks it's just the beginning. And studying infrasound actually has implications for humans, too. Scientists are using it to improve weather predictions and climate models.
Okay, so that is from above the sea, but now we're going to go under the sea, right? Regina, you have a story about a really cool fossil from the ocean floor.
Yeah, this fossil is from 480 million years ago. We're talking well before the dinosaurs. And the scene was detailed in a study that came out last week in Communications Biology. The fossil shows how animals lived with each other and sometimes on each other.
Yeah, in this case, a cephalopod with a shell, which is basically an ancient relative of the squid, it died and fell to the seafloor, and then these sea worms took up residence on its shell and built tough tube-like houses around themselves.
Yeah, you can see 88 of them growing all over its dead body. Timothy Topper, a paleontologist not associated with the study, said it looked like a cephalopod having a bad hair day.
A cephalopod that looks like Medusa. Wait, so like a bunch of worms living on a corpse? This is so gross, guys.
Yeah, this is our Halloween theme, although, you know, this happens at the bottom of the ocean every day. You might have heard about whale falls, Elsa, where like a whale dies and sinks to the seafloor, and then its carcass becomes this giant all-you-can-eat buffet for crabs and other sea creatures that, you know, are living in this environment where there's just not much food, so you gotta get it when you can find it.
Wait, back to the worms though. What is so special about this particular fossil?